because it brought some really interesting thoughts to light. And I'll just emphasise straight away from the start, all the problems we've got, there's a remarkable degree of consensus in our world as to how we can stay open around community involvement and wider community and cultural use. And that's something to hold heartening, because in a lot of sectors you don't get that level of agreement. But there has questions already been asked about how are there do you talk to each other, and I think that's a really important question. I don't think there are too many of us. I think if you look at any charity sector in the world, look at children, look at animals, there are a multiplicity of diverse charities trying to help their own way. Competition and diversity is seen as a great thing in the private sector and business. Why should it not be a good thing in the charity sector? I think it's healthy and vibrant, and we all bring a different thing to this challenge. And you've heard from, of course, the National Church Trust earlier about their grant giving. I'm going to talk about the work of CCT in the care we give for buildings that have been closed for regular parish worship. In fact, Claire even mentioned Walpole. St Peter's Walpole has been aided by grants by the NCT. The corner is a CCT church that we're looking after. It's got terrible salting columns, but we need a lot of help with that. So even in one week, both charities are vital. I think we all are really important, and we face a challenge which Linda has begun to outline, which actually none of us can tackle alone. In the past, that a big challenge with looking after historic churches would have led to intervention from the state or the church, top down, loads of money, solved centrally. That will again. The solution has to be about working together. It has to be about communities. It has to be about, please excuse my jargon, bottom-up approaches. And that even extends to joining things. Claire's brought lots more leaflets than I am efficient in that, but we all need you to join us. We need you. We need your support. So you may well be thinking, so which charity do I support? Well, of course, it has to be all of them. It has to be both of us. Join us both. Please do have a look at both our websites. And then over time, you may decide one is more for you than the other. But whatever you decide, please join somebody and help us in your way, because it is a very difficult time financially. So, I'm just going to talk a little bit about things from the Church's Conservation Trust's perspective, because microcosm of what's happening to English historic churches, and indeed not only the challenges, but some of the solutions. And I think we can help in our small way by demonstrating new ways of working with historic parish churches, because we run an estate of them where we can really try things out. I would just say one thing though, the churches we look after are closed in only one sense, and that is the statutory sense of having been closed, come out of the parish system. However, they remain consecrated, they remain available for occasional parish worship, and many are used in that way, and most importantly, they are literally open every day of the year, most of them. Although I know you point out one immediately isn't. We do have a few problems there which we're challenging. So many of you know all about the CCT, many of you have known it for many years, and our predecessor, the RCF. We now care for 343 historic English churches. We took on St Botolph's on the South Downs Way last week. I'm very pleased to say a very fine medieval church with some great wall paintings inside it. So the number of churches we look after is gradually going up, but we are also finding new futures for some of our churches. So the number is much more stable than it was, and in fact we have put 2 back to parish use in London and Toxteth in recent years. We are a charity. That's an important point. We're established by Parliament through ecclesiastical legislation, so we're a uniquely English institution, and you shouldn't burrow too far into the detail who's actually in charge of it, because it's an English fudge as well. But we have very strong relations with government and with the church, but we are ultimately governed by a group of 10 independent trustees. And as a charity, we need your support. Our thing, traditionally, until 10 years ago, from the government and the Church of England, the church commissioners in particular. That money has been frozen, and in recent times, the government money, since the economic crisis, has been dropping steeply. That is dropping by 5 or 6% a year at the moment, and current negotiations you'll have seen in the press, they're talking about 10% cuts in 2015 on an annual basis. It's going to carry on like this until at least 2018. I don't think it's a new trend. It's got worse because of the economic crisis, But in my view, over the last 20 years, the state has begun to withdraw from heritage protection in a direct sense of funding it. And I think it's a long-term trend, and we have to keep the public sector engaged in creative.
Has a turnover of about 6 million. We have 50 staff, mostly out in the regions, working for more in churches, and we rely very heavily on about 2,000 regular volunteers, and increasingly that is a major focus of our work, is supporting volunteers around the churches we care for to get them open and well presented and well looked after, because we don't have enough paid staff to do that. So perhaps the first thing to say about the CCT in the full estate, I did that, stop doing that. We look after the most amazing collection of buildings. It's a cross-section of English Anglican parish church architecture and history through the ages, though short of an early English church and a 20th century church. So church commissioners in the audience, perhaps you could help us with that one. This is Norfolk, this is St Margaret Hayes, a fantastic church that has stayed unchanged since the 12th century, and that expresses what it's all about. The word preservation, as Linda said, is one we avoid, but actually preserving, protecting special character is a very important part of the work, and you can see it there. And you can see it inside as well. We protect the most fantastic interiors. Stop doing that. Interesting. Pointing this one up, this is West Burgle, St Mary in Essex. It's got bits from the 14th, 15th, 16th, 17th, 18th, 19th century. These are the churches the public love and get straight away, and they go, wow, this is fantastic and amazing. They discover bits of wall painting hidden away. They get a real sense of history. They find a monument hidden away in a side aisle. They find bits of carving, and they love them. But we also look after some all-of-a-piece Victorian things like this. This is Skelton-cum-Newby in Yorkshire. Much more difficult, public actually. They're clearly very fine pieces of work. They don't have that same sense of history and wonder about them. This one which has its own special story, as mentioned earlier by Anne, telling stories is what a lot of it's about. This was built with the money, the ransom money, the poor, the mother of the son had been captured by Greek brigands in the 19th century, and unfortunately the ransom money didn't work, so had to be spent on a memorial in the form of this church. We also look after a fantastic collection of furniture. We forget that it's not just the buildings, it's the furnishings, it's the contents. This is a pew end at Stamford. We love pews, although sometimes they do have to be very clear. We look after the most fantastic collection of glass. Century St Bernard stained glass panels, which were taken from Cologne in the 19th century by the Vicar of Shrewsbury, St Mary. I'm glad to say we did lend them back for an international exhibition there a few years ago. These are unique pieces of work and absolutely stunning. People come and visit them in their own right. We have monuments, carvings, we have tombs. These are all alabaster tombs in St John the Baptist. This is in Yorkshire. And we have the most amazing wall paintings. We have art, origination. How often do you see art where it was originally done rather than behind a glass case, far removed from its origins? This, of course, is these are Victorian wall paintings by Morris in All Saints, Cambridge. And we have medieval wall paintings, St John the Baptist. Amazing pieces of work. You can just walk in, nobody hinders you, no fee on the door, though a collection box on the way out, please do put something in. And no ropes, no glass cases. It's there for everybody to experience, see and enjoy in that very special place. And that's what visitors tell us they really love, that special character, that calm, that peace, and be able to wander around and see things. We also have some 20th century wall paintings in the arch at St John of the Gate in Bristol. Some people might call it graffiti, but actually it is 20th century wall paintings, and one day to be history. We have the most amazing collection of textiles back at Skelton-cum-Newby in Yorkshire, the most amazing altar frontal which was recently served, and we agonised over whether to put it back in the church because there is no security there. It is open to the public. Should it be in the house in set in glass? We thought no, it has to be where it belongs. And we can talk endlessly about security, but for us it's eyes and ears, it's open doors, it's public, it's visitors, it's communities getting and keeping on these fantastic buildings. That's the best protection against vandalism and theft. So we look at this fantastic, and that's just a tiny taster of it, and of course you'll recognise that it exemplifies what is also in a much wider collection of listed parish buildings across England. But times are hard. I think in Inter because there have been generous, but again face real problems. Everywhere in Europe, we're seeing it, we're a very diverse continent, but everywhere the trends are the same. It's not always dwindling congregations, of course. Many of the churches we look after were destroyed by bad planning, by roads that cut them off from their very healthy congregations. In some countries in Northern Europe now, you're seeing state support rapidly diminishing after many years of huge generosity. And of course, there's the problems in the Catholic Church, which are having the same effect abroad. So everywhere we're seeing this threat building, and buildings struggling to keep going. A long line in state and church funding, central funding, not this. All heritage bodies are seeing this. Heritage Lottery Fund, of course, bucks the trend, and you're going to hear from them later on, and we will mention projects they're supporting. Just at the time that heritage is having to turn to philanthropy to a much greater degree, there is a general drop in charitable giving, about 3% a year, not surprising given the economic environment. Though I will support what Claire said earlier about it holding up okay in this sector. Going back to the question about competition, we all need your funds. I think heritage and the church sector in particular have had a pretty small part of the giving pie, and please excuse the jargon again. I don't think we've been particularly good at raising funds from the public, and I think the public have thought traditionally that the government and the CAV pay for everything and they're pretty rich. So we have a good job, a big job to do in persuading the public that we're a cause that needs their support as well than the other causes that are out there. And I think we can together raise the proportion of charitable giving coming to historic churches without anybody losing out. Costs are rising, although inflation's generally low, conservation costs are rising quite fast, partly because a lot of conservation contractors seem to have gone out of business. And as Linda pointed out, I think it was Linda or possibly Anne, there's a wider trend of public buildings closing. It's not churches particularly, there's a wider drop in public participation. And I think churches suffer as a consequence of that, but also there's a real opportunity there. Many of the churches that we strive to keep going are the last civil society building left in a village. The pub's gone, the shop's gone, the bus service, the train service have gone. The church is the last hope for the community area. We have to keep them open. And I think wider society recognises that, so it gives churches an opportunity to get wider support. So that's our church in Bolton, a big new project. That's just to emphasise the point about times being hard. What are some of the solutions that we can bit about?
Well, already, absolutely key that it has to be about engaging people locally, bottom up. It has to be about finding out what the needs are locally and then seeing how you can meet that with the church building you have. Very important to start with needs. Too often people go into a church building and say, oh, what could we do here? We could take out the pews there, squeeze in a toilet there, put in some lighting here. But before they've thought about what actually is needed locally, then you put a cafe in. There's no point in that. You've got to start with need, and then you say, okay, the community really lacks a facility for young people. How can the church meet that need? Is there room for it? Do we really need to take the pews out? Not always. We've already a lot about community use. This is not just about use, this is about support. Too often we have got involved in church where the regular community has become isolated, has become quite defensive, faced with a large repair bill. They felt very abandoned, and we discover a lot of other people in the community, non-church goers, who would have helped, but nobody, or even worse, they said, it's nothing to do with you. We have to broaden the constituency of support locally and nationally for churches. We have to get people who don't go to church regularly or at all to be interested and see these buildings as of relevance to them. And of course, I like to talk about extended use. I agree with Linda, there is a continuum here. I think we had a European conference quite recently where a Catholic priest said it's really important that the new use does not obliterate the old use, but is in cohesion with it. And I think that is absolutely the key for me. And you'll see in CCT churches,
all our buildings still have a consecrated chancel at the end of it. Even our Circus Church in Bristol is still a religious building, and the circus is in conversation with the original use. And I think that really makes the special character of the place. You do have some cases where it needs to be a completely new alternative use, particularly big urban churches with so there has to be a continuum there, and we have very flexibly.
The ownership model, I think, has been referred to earlier as well. I think there's a process here. We've done a lot of work in the Anglican Church on uses, and I think that's fantastic and it's cutting edge, but not enough thought has been given to reducing the burden on a PCC. You get these all these whiz-bang fantastic uses, and you've still got 3 members of parliament having to run the thing. You need to have new models of wider community trusts. These groups have been referred to. There's a lot of models out there, usually outside the church sector, that we need to be testing out and making more widely available. We need to share the burden. And the word partnership, very overused word, but it is absolutely vital. We can't do this on our own, none of us. Anybody who thinks they can do it on their own is under an illusion. No institution is going to do this without the help of others. And it's not just partnership within the heritage and churches sector, it's partnership beyond, working with tourism bodies, with community bodies, with arts bodies, with education bodies, and even with commercial bodies. So that all sounds very nice. I'm sure you're thinking, well, what does it mean in practice? Well, it means a whole range of projects. When the CCC just identified repair need and got a load of money from the church and the state and did the church up, although we still do churches up. But it has to be as part of a holistic package, a whole range of activity, and pairs are met as part of a plan for the future of the church. And I know the new HLF scheme is thinking as well. You'll hear more about that later. What things might we be talking about? Is Youthful Wolfhamcote in Warwickshire, a wonderful church, medieval church in the middle of a non-existent medieval village in the middle of nowhere, and yet here is a whole gang of kids from a hostel not far down the road who've never been in church before, partnership with the homeless charity running the hostel, and they spent a day clearing the graveyard and researching the graves and just exploring and understanding the church. They helped us, we helped them, and they will always remember that. Craft skills and jobs, really, of course, churches have a contribution to make. Dying craft skills need to be protected, but also people need a vocation. The two can be beautifully matched. Talking to a colleague earlier, how monumental brass is, the skills there are dying out. Well, there's a lot of people out there who might be interested in learning skills in that and getting a vocation. Tourism, that's been mentioned already. I think we have a huge way to go in tourism. There's been lots of great projects out there in the churches. South Yorkshire, I think, was mentioned earlier, but they're all term and they all finish and they're localised. We need to really raise the game in church tourism so that we're up there with the mainstream. We're working with Visit England. We're working with English Heritage. You'll have seen our sites in the English Heritage Handbook. We have to provide a professional visitor welcome, because if we want the public, the visiting, to go into our churches, they have to be able to find them, they have to be able to get in the door, and then when they get in, they have to find things addressed, good interpretation, and a welcoming smile, maybe a cafe even. This is an example of a project we linked to 14 of our churches with the Archway project as the website. This is a whole combination of activity. We got some money from Europe and from the local authority in DEFRA to do this, and we had artists in residence. We had working with local people to create new community art in the churches. We provided a trail around the churches and all sorts of social media stuff that I don't quite understand, geocaching and things like that, where you find little things that you can point your smartphone at and it tells you all sorts of fascinating information. And we also paid through that programme, brought the whole place to life. Volunteers went up, visitors went up, community and volunteer involvement went up, and churches are open more. Young people in education, this is Skidbrook in Lincolnshire. This is a ruin. It was a complete nightmare. We had terrible problems with vandalism. Now we've got a nature reserve in the churchyard and an education project you can see there, and we have no problems with vandalism anymore.
working to keep churches open is something that CE has done a little bit of work on. This is where we really team up with CBC and others in really helping churches through the bad patches. Some of the churches we've taken on were going through a bad patch. Maybe the vicar was near retirement. There was a huge repair challenge. The community was a bit depressed. 10 years later, with the right support, those churches could have been kept open. And there are cases where we can help together. The right partners can get together with funding, CCT with some hands on it, but help support
communities through the bad patches, find new uses, do fundraising, create a business plan, get the repairs funded, and then let them carry on. And I think that model is a really important one for staying in the future, because again, none of us can do it alone. We can't take on all the churches. We all need to work together to keep some of them going. One's meant to illustrate commercial approaches. And commercial is no longer a dirty word in the charity sector. I think churches have been seen as a bit of a soft touch in the past. Far too often, people use our buildings for nothing or not very much, and they make money out of it. Of course, we must allow that to happen with charity community causes, but there are plenty of people like touring orchestras who make a lot of money performing, and churches should get a fair share of that. I just want to end by illustrating a couple of big projects that we've been involved in, really because they show also how on a large scale you sometimes have to bring partnerships to tackle things. When I joined CCT, we faced severe problems with about 10 urban churches that had been invested in us. We had no plan for the repair, multi-million-pound challenges, and they threatened to take all our repair funding for years. So we had to find new uses for those buildings that would bring in new life and, of course, the money to fix them up. So this is our favourite courses in Bristol. This is how it looked before. This is a Grade 1 Georgian church. Can you believe that? The state of that was horrendous. Water pouring through the roof, arson, drug taking, all caboodle in a very down area. And now it's a Circus School run by Circomedia, beautifully conserved. They're beautifully conserved with the flying trapeze rig underneath it, so it's got use. Circomedia bring the community in. They do a lot of work with disadvantaged kids. Also run a commercial program to bring money in. Conservationists are happy because it's looking great. It's still a consecrated church, so the Christian presence is still there. This church could go back to being a church if it's ever needed to in the future. And the whole area is regeneration. This church is a symbol of life coming back to the St Paul's district of Bristol. It's well worth a visit. I talked earlier about churches. This is literally St Mary Quay. That's a one-way oratory around it and two other medieval churches in 60s highway. That pretty much killed those churches, although I must admit St Mary's was already closed. So they've been going downhill for a very, very long time indeed. This is actually very near the waterfront and the city centre in Ipswich, so lots of potential here. And working with the Heritage Lottery Fund, working with a local mental health charity, Suffolk Mind, working with donors with money to form this church into a now, unlike St Paul's, has not which will not. So there's a lot of flexibility for its adaptation. That's what the inside element open in a month. Very sensitive intervention that lasted open and beautiful, and in addition the back, which will give it the floor space for this will buy in the future. That church itself, once the capital had been met on contribution from this is Leeds, this is contrary colleges like Ipswich where you have to do intervention. It's going, and we have an object up in Bolton. So I showed you the Rex picture earlier, where working with HLF again, we're about to put together a project to transform that building into a community centre, and that is full of Grade 1 pews, and we are going to have to take those pews out to save that building. That is a hard decision to have had to make, particularly for a conservation charity. There will be a loss in that building, but as a result, the rest of the historic fabric will be saved, and we in that area, no other way to do it. This is Leeds St John. You would not take these out here. These are the most fantastic Jacobean woodwork.
But it was also in a very run-down state. We had lots of problems with vandalism and drug taking in the churchyard, just on the edge of a bit of a down shopping centre. Unfortunately, it's been rebuilt. Age Concern have taken the building on the edge of the churchyard and running a cafe. And we raised the money, mostly from local time and our own funds, to put our own northern office and a meeting room, very small, vestry. So this is a modern addition in the town of the vestry. Fitted this in without losing any of the...
There's the meeting room and ticks away. It just reminds you of time passing. It's now working as a successful building. We've got a presence there. There's visitors. It's open every single day to visitors now. And the council has done up the churchyard, which belongs to them. And there's a programme of concerts and activities just building up. So that building, again, now has a sustainable future. I think I'm probably a bit low of time, so this is quite a key point, income generation. I've touched on a lot of this. Part of it's about reducing costs. I won't dwell on that for the moment. Part of it's about membership. And for CCT, as for NCT, we need your involvement. We need people involved, and we do need ongoing support. And our membership teams, they're not a lot of money, but they are growing, and they will ensure long-term sustainability. And that's the key thing for us. As public money drops, we hope it won't drop too far, but we need a lot of streams. We're building up streams of income, and membership is a really important one for the future. Getting local people involved in fundraising for church, something we need to do a lot more of, so that people really feel ownership of what's happening there. Major donor fundraising, getting people who are wealthy, who are near churches, who perhaps loved churches and opened them and cared for them in the past, but never given any to support them. The time has come to get tough, start asking for their help. And getting visitors and users of the churches. Earned income I've touched on also. We need to be much more confident about asking visitors for a donation. Some churches are very good at saying how much their church costs to keep going. We need to be very explicit about that. And more profile, more education, more telling the world about the risks to churches. We mustn't hide this. We mustn't pretend that everything's fine, but also saying about the great opportunities and the wonderful things that are being done locally. You have to tell both stories to the press. They're not interested in just the good news. They have to have a bit of frisson of threat as well. But if you give them that, you get the good news too, and we get far we need. So I'm sorry that's been a bit of a whirlwind tour, but I hope that gets across where we're coming from and how we think ECT can help contribute to the debate as we develop these new ways of thinking about historic church. We need to do this in a way that inclusive, involves those people, has to be much wider partnership with people outside the usual sector, and we have to represent churches. We need to redefine them for a younger generation who are not used to being in churches. We have to open them up and say, these are for you, these are buildings that belong to you, they're of interest to you, look, find out and enjoy them, and then they will get involved and secure the future for the longer term. Thank you very much.